The greasy smell of old fries hung in the air as Christine Lombardi wiped down table 7. Her feet ached, a constant reminder of the double shift she was pulling at Tony's diner. Just a few more hours, and she could go home to her tiny, cold apartment. As she stacked the dirty plates, her cloth brushed against something soft and out of place. A wallet. It wasn't just any wallet. It was made of the softest black leather she had ever felt, thick and heavy in her palm. She glanced around. The diner was empty except for Old Man Henderson snoring in the corner booth. Her fingers, clumsy with sudden nerves, fumbled it open. Her breath caught. It was stuffed with cash. Not just a few bills, but thick rolls of $100 notes. This was more money than she made in a year. Her heart thudded against her ribs. For a single, wild second, she thought of her mountain of bills, her broken-down car, the constant, grinding worry. She could take it. No one would ever know. But the thought was like a splash of cold water. It wasn't hers. With a shaky hand, she searched for an ID. No driver's license, no credit cards. Just a single, stark black card nestled in a slot. Embossed in silver were 2 words, Rodrigo Conti. Below that was a phone number, nothing else. Swallowing her fear, she used the sticky phone behind the counter. It rang once before a deep, gravelly voice answered, a voice that sounded like it had swallowed broken glass. Yes. Hello. Christine stammered. I found a wallet. At the diner. Does it belong to a Rodrigo Conti? There was a heavy silence on the other end, so complete she thought the line had gone dead. Where are you? The voice finally asked, not answering her question. Tony's Diner on Elm Street, she whispered. Stay there. The line went dead. Christine hugged her arms, suddenly feeling very cold. She had just invited a wolf into her simple life, and she could feel its breath on the back of her neck. He arrived an hour later, not with a bang, but with a presence that sucked all the sound from the room. The bell above the door didn't just jingle, it seemed to choke. Rodrigo Conti was tall, with broad shoulders that filled the doorway. His hair was dark, and his jaw was sharp enough to cut glass. But it was his eyes that froze her to the spot. They were the color of a stormy sky and just as cold, scanning the room and landing on her like a physical weight. He moved toward her, his walk smooth and silent, like a predator. 2 other large men followed him but stayed by the door, watching everyone and everything. Christine felt like a mouse trapped in an open field. You are the girl who called? He asked, his voice a low rumble. She could only nod, handing him the wallet. Her fingers brushed against his, and a jolt, like static electricity, shot up her arm. He took it, not even looking inside. You didn't take the money, he stated. It wasn't a question. It was an observation laced with disbelief. It wasn't mine, Christine said, finding her voice. It sounded small and weak in the vast space his presence created. A flicker of something, amusement, crossed his stone-like face. An honest woman. A rare thing. His stormy eyes looked her over, from her worn-out sneakers to her tired face. She felt he could see right through her, see every bill, every worry, every dream she'd ever given up on. You work hard here. It pays the bills, she said, lifting her chin a little, defiant. Not enough, I think, he replied, his gaze lingering on a small hole in the sleeve of her uniform. I am a man who repays his debts. I own a club, the Velvet Rose. It's a nicer establishment than this. I need a new hostess. The pay is 5 times what you make here. Christine's mind reeled. 5 times? It was an insane amount of money. It was an answer to every prayer she'd ever whispered in the dark. But the look in his eyes, the dangerous air that clung to him like expensive cologne, screamed that it was a deal with the devil. This man was not just a club owner. He was trouble. But her rent was due, and her cupboards were bare. The fear of him was a powerful thing, but the fear of being poor and helpless was stronger. Okay, she heard herself say, the word tasting like both hope and ash. I'll take the job. The Velvet Rose was a different world. It was all dark wood, soft lighting, and the low thrum of money and power. Men in sharp suits and women in glittering dresses sipped expensive drinks. Christine, in a simple black dress provided for her, felt like a sparrow among peacocks. And everywhere she went, she felt Rodrigo's eyes on her. He was always watching from his booth in the corner, a king on his throne, his cold gaze following her as she seated guests. He never smiled, never approached her, but his attention was a constant, heavy weight. One night, the tension in the club was thicker than usual. The air felt charged, like before a lightning strike. Christine was guiding a group to their table when the front doors burst open. A group of hard-faced men stormed in. They weren't there to drink. Chaos erupted. Glasses shattered. People screamed. A man was thrown over a table. Christine stood frozen, terror rooting her to the spot. One of the invading men, his face twisted in anger, lunged toward Rodrigo's booth. He saw Christine in his path and shoved her aside violently. She cried out as she stumbled, expecting to hit the hard floor. Instead, she crashed into a wall of solid muscle. Rodrigo. He had moved faster than she thought possible. He caught her with one arm, shoving her behind him, while his other hand held a gun, pointed straight at the attacker. The world narrowed to that moment. The loud bang, the smell of gunpowder, the safe, terrifying circle of his arm. In seconds, it was over. Rodrigo's men had handled the rest. The rival gang was dragged out. The music started again, a nervous whisper. Rodrigo turned to her, his eyes blazing. He grabbed her arm, his grip firm but not painful, and pulled her into a back office, slamming the door. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his voice rough. She shook her head, trembling from head to toe. "No. This is my world, Christine," he said, his face inches from hers. "You saw nothing tonight. But they saw you. They saw me protect you." He let out a frustrated breath, running a hand through his hair. "I made a mistake. I brought you into my light, and now you are standing in my shadow. Your life is in danger because you are near me." Tears welled in her eyes. "What are you saying?" He looked at her, a storm of conflict in his gaze. Then, he said the words that would shatter her world and build a new, terrifying one in its place. "There is only one way I can protect you now. Only one reason that makes sense in my world for me to guard someone so closely." He paused, his stormy eyes locking with hers, stealing the air from her lungs. "You will marry me." The mansion was a beautiful prison. Its high ceilings echoed with silence, and the expensive furniture felt cold and unwelcoming. Christine was given her own room, far from Rodrigo's, a clear line drawn in the sand. She was his wife in name only, a piece on his chessboard he'd moved to protect. The arguments started immediately. "You can't just order me to stay inside all day," Christine yelled, her voice bouncing off the marble floors of the grand foyer. Rodrigo stood by the door, his posture rigid. "It's for your safety. This isn't a discussion, Christine." "I'm not your prisoner," she fired back, storming up to him, her small frame trembling with anger. She wasn't afraid of his scowl anymore. How could she be? He had already done the worst thing imaginable. He had stolen her life. "You are my wife," he said, his voice a low, controlled growl. "That makes you my responsibility. And in my world, that means you follow my rules." "Your world is a nightmare," she shouted. A strange flicker passed through his stormy eyes. He took a step closer, looming over her. The air crackled with a new, different kind of tension. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was a thrilling, dangerous energy that made her heart pound for a reason she didn't understand. "It's your world now, too," he whispered, his gaze dropping to her lips for a heartbeat before he turned and walked away, leaving her frustrated, confused, and utterly alone. A week later, he told her they were going to a party. "It's important. We must look like a real, happy couple," Rodrigo instructed, his tone all business as a designer draped her in a gown of deep emerald silk. "Stay close to me. Do not wander." The party was at a rival family's estate, a display of wealth and power even grander than Rodrigo's. Christine held onto his arm, her smile feeling painted on. She felt the stares, the whispers. "That's Conti's new wife, the waitress," the words slithered through the crowd. Then, a man with a slick smile and cruel eyes, Marco Andretti, blocked their path. "Rodrigo! I heard you picked up a stray," he said, his voice dripping with fake cheer. He looked Christine up and down like she was a piece of meat. Cute. But does she know which fork to use for her salad, or should we have the kitchen send out a spork? Laughter tittered around them. Christine's face burned with humiliation. She opened her mouth to retort, but Rodrigo moved first. He didn't shout. He didn't even raise his voice. But the air went dead cold. In one fluid motion, he stepped in front of Christine, placing his body squarely between her and Marco. His hand shot out and gripped Marco's shoulder, his knuckles turning white. The look on his face was pure, undiluted menace. "You will look at her," Rodrigo said, his voice so quiet it was more terrifying than a scream, "with respect. You will speak to her," his grip tightened, making Marco wince, "with respect. Or I will remove your tongue and feed it to you. Do you understand? She is Christine Conti, my wife. And she is worth more than you and your entire bloodline." The silence that followed was absolute. Marco nodded, his face pale, and scurried away. The crowd quickly found other things to look at. Back in the limousine, the silence was heavy. Christine stared at Rodrigo, her heart thumping wildly. He had been terrifying, but he had defended her. He had claimed her. "Thank you," she whispered. He turned his head, the city lights flashing across his sharp features. The cold mask was gone, replaced by a raw, burning intensity she had never seen before. "No one insults what is mine," he said, his voice rough. He reached out, his fingers gently tracing her jawline. It was the first tender touch he had ever given her. A shiver ran down her spine. Then he leaned in and his lips met hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision, a fiery, desperate release of all the anger, tension, and forbidden attraction that had been simmering between them for weeks. It was a battle and a surrender all at once. When he finally pulled away, both of them were breathless. The hate was still there, but now it was tangled up with something else, something hot and burning and impossible to ignore. Something broke down that night. The walls between them developed a crack, and a fragile truce began to grow. Christine stopped yelling, and Rodrigo stopped giving orders. They started talking. Late one night, she found him in his study, a single lamp lighting the room, an old, faded photograph in his hand. She saw a younger Rodrigo, smiling, his arm around a man who shared his eyes. "My brother, Angelo," Rodrigo said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. He didn't tell her to leave. The Andrettis, Marco's father, they killed him. Took everything from me. Suddenly, the cold boss was gone. In his place was a man, just a man, carrying a weight of grief so heavy it had frozen his heart. She saw the lonely boy who had to become a monster to survive. She understood, for the first time, why his protection was so fierce, so absolute. It came from a place of having lost everything once before. That understanding changed everything. The mansion no longer felt like a prison. It started to feel like a home. His presence was no longer a threat, it was a comfort. One evening, they were talking in the living room, sitting closer than they ever had before. The air was warm, filled with the soft sound of the fireplace. He was telling her a silly story about Angelo, a real smile touching his lips. Christine reached out and placed her hand over his. He went still. His eyes, those stormy gray eyes, searched her face. The look in them wasn't cold, or angry, or even protective. It was full of a deep, aching want. "Christine," he breathed, her name a prayer on his lips. This time, when he kissed her, it was different. It was slow. It was deep. It was a question, and her answer was to melt into him, her arms winding around his neck. The last of her resistance crumbled into dust. The fake marriage, the dangerous world, the forced closeness, it all fell away, leaving only the two of them. He didn't lead her to her room. He led her to his. That night, their marriage stopped being a show. In the darkness of his bedroom, surrounded by the scent of him, they gave in to the burning attraction that had been there from the very beginning. It was real, it was passionate, and it was a surrender for both of them. The touches were no longer for an audience. The whispers were just for each other. As she fell asleep in his arms, his body a solid, warm shield against the world, Christine let herself believe the most dangerous thing of all. She let herself believe that he truly cared for her, and that this crazy, forced beginning could somehow lead to a real forever. The change in Rodrigo Conti was a quiet miracle. The man who once spoke in cold commands now asked for her opinion. The storm in his eyes had softened to a warm, steady gray, always seeking her out in a room. He laughed, a real, deep sound that made Christine's heart soar. The mansion was no longer a prison of marble and silence. It was filled with their shared jokes, with the scent of meals they cooked together, with the warmth of a real home. One evening, curled together on the large sofa, he traced circles on her hand. "A boy," he murmured, his voice thoughtful. "With your kind eyes." "Or a girl with your stubborn chin," Christine replied, her heart swelling with a joy so profound it almost hurt. They were talking about a future. A real one. A family. The dangerous world outside seemed to fade away, a distant nightmare overshadowed by this beautiful dream. She had fallen completely and utterly in love with her husband. The waitress and the mafia boss. It was no longer a forced deal, but a true, happy love story. She had forgotten he was ever her enemy. That beautiful illusion shattered on a Thursday. Rodrigo had arranged a large family dinner, a show of strength and unity. The table was loud, filled with his loyal men and their families. Christine sat beside him, her hand in his, feeling like she truly belonged. The smashing of the front door was like a gunshot. Police officers in body armor swarmed the room, their shouts drowning out the chaos. "Rodrigo Conti, you are under arrest for the murder of Marco Andretti." The world slowed down. Christine watched in horror as they roughly pulled Rodrigo from his chair. He didn't fight them. His eyes, those warm, loving eyes she had fallen asleep looking at just hours before, found hers across the table. But they weren't warm anymore. They were shattered, filled with a pain so deep it stole her breath. He looked at her not with love, but with a heartbreak that spoke of the deepest betrayal. "Christine," he whispered, the single word a question that broke her soul. She could only shake her head, tears streaming down her face. "No. Rodrigo, no." But he was already being dragged away, his final, devastated look branding itself into her memory. He believed she had done this. The evidence, they said, was perfect. A tip from a source very close to him. Christine was destroyed, a ghost wandering the halls of the suddenly freezing mansion. But her love for him was stronger than her grief. She worked desperately, calling lawyers, trying to find any clue, any thread that could lead to the real killer. Everyone believed it was her. The police saw a trapped wife seeking revenge. His men saw a traitor. In desperation, she sneaked into his private office, a room she had always respected as his alone. She had to find something, anything. Her fingers trembled as she searched the drawers, finding nothing. Then, her hand brushed against a seemingly solid panel at the back of the lowest drawer. It gave way with a soft click. A hidden compartment. Inside was a single, slim file. Her heart pounded with a sickening dread. She opened it, and the air left her lungs. They were pictures of her, but not from the diner, not from the time of the wallet. These were older, much older. There she was, laughing with a friend outside her community college. Here she was, carrying groceries in the rain, her coat pulled tight. In another, she was sitting on a park bench, reading a book, completely unaware. The dates on the photos were from over a year ago. Long, long before she ever found the wallet. Her eyes fell on a final document, a single typed page. It was a report. On her. Her habits, her work schedule, her life. And at the bottom, in Rodrigo's distinct, sharp handwriting, was a note. Asterisk, the wallet is the best approach. She is too honest to keep it. It will force a meeting. Asterisk. The truth crashed down on her, cold and cruel. The lost wallet wasn't an accident. Their entire meeting, their entire relationship, was a carefully constructed lie. He hadn't fallen in love with her over time. He had seen her, decided he wanted her, and orchestrated their entire chance encounter. He had manipulated her, trapped her in his world with a clever trick, all while pretending it was fate. The real betrayal wasn't hers. It was his. His first and most terrible. The man she loved, The father of the child she now realized she was carrying had never been real at all. What would you do if you discovered your entire love story was a lie? Could you ever forgive such a beginning? Let us know which country you're watching from and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective is the final chapter to this story.